Welcome back. Episode number, what, we say 19?
19.
We got a number today, episode 19. Welcome back to the Stevens Playbook. I'm Michael.
And I'm Matt.
And boy, do we have a show for you. Took that quote from VeggieTales. Don't know what episode, but it was there.
Like every episode. It's the beginning.
Yep. What do you got?
We have progressed pretty far today. I think we can officially say that our low wireframe is done. And a wireframe is just basically the writing on a scratch piece of paper, or in our case, it was on a website. Just the very basics of how how we want our app to look. And we finished that, and I thought we were done. And then it goes from a low wireframe to a higher wireframe. So it's still wireframes. But now we move on to the coloring and putting in the details of the image. Before it's just like a big square that says insert picture here. Now we actually put the picture in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then color scheme, what was it? Anything else that goes with it?
We got to figure out the app name and logo. We got to
Yeah.
do.
App name and logo are important.
Right. So basically,
It's just adding the
we're
details.
graphic designers now.
Yeah.
Because we're taking those sketches and turning them into images for every single screen you're going to see on the app. And that's a lot of work, but
Yep.
it's necessary, and
Our
it'll show good stuff.
person that's coding it said that that's the next step. Then it's easy to translate. Apparently, between programmers, the problem is like people like us have like a great vision of what we want, but sometimes it's hard to like express that to somebody else who's developing it. And so now we got to come up with more creative designs for it.
Yeah, buddy. Cool. So that's where we're at with the app. What we got?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's where we're at with the app. I got my next YouTube in progress, the next episode, and then I just listened to a pretty good podcast from the Founders podcast. This one was about an interview with Jeff Bezos, and we all know who Jeff Bezos is. Pretty successful dude. So he got some good takeaways from here. Let's see. So when Jeff Bezos stepped out of the company, he had some feelings toward that, right? So the question was, what did it feel like when you stepped away from Amazon? And what he said was he had a lot to say about it, but the key points that I took away was he said, build a company that will outlast you. You don't want to be, you don't want it to be dependent on you. So as we take this brand, this company into our own hands and we scale, the biggest thing is going to be these processes. And when we bring people in, that they can execute on the guidance and the vision. And if something happens to one of us, the company's still good. Still got things. So obviously this is a future problem because we're the only people here. And so if something happens to us, it's game over. But down the road, it's something to think about, to put your mind towards how can I write, continuity, express our procedures so that if something happens to me or I'm in the hospital or on a trip, the company is going to continue to operate. So obviously that's a future problem, but something to think about right now as we're building the processes.
Yep. Right now we still have decided to stay with Monday.com, and we use that and put all of our notes in there. So on a small scale of what Michael just said, is that how we do that right now is we have our notes. And so everything is lined out of each step and what's next to do in that step process.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have like a little note on
Yeah.
it that tells us like this is what we have to do in that step.
Yeah. Because long down the road, I mean, I can't really see myself handing over and getting out of it, but it might be a place that we get to. And even if we don't get to that, something could happen. It's just something to think about. We're not in the the shoes of Jeff Bezos, but you got to understand history so that when we get there, it doesn't repeat itself. Issues do. Don't. Next question he was asked: where does your confidence come from? So, looking at Jeff Bezos, takes a lot of confidence to build what he's built. And so when he was asked, he said, "It's human nature to overemphasize risk and underemphasize opportunity." And it kind of goes back to the book that I was talking about yesterday, Think and Grow Rich and Faith, where it's talking about like thinking small is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have to think large, you have to believe in it, and if you don't, then it's not going to happen. So that's kind of what he referred to. Is he said thinking small is a self-fulfilling prophecy, meaning you have to think large to accomplish large things. Next thing he said, and doesn't really apply to us in our current state, but it will down the road. Says your frontline workers are the only ones who really know what's going on. So in that, it's you better find out what they know if you want to improve the company and push it in the right direction. You some things to ask: what's the dumbest thing that we're doing as a company, and what can we do to improve? I think what this was brought up by these questions is by someone who was purchasing other companies and then realizing after all the issues by going down to the front level workers and asking those questions. And he was saying, as a leader of the company, that's something you might want to know. What are things that we're doing wrong, or what are things that we should be doing to move to the next level? So right now we are the frontline workers. Thumbs up. We are the front line, but down the road, situations change as we scale. So something to keep in mind. Next thing, and this is important for us here, he says you have to have contagious optimism and energy. So as a entrepreneur, an inventor, sometimes things go wrong. By sometimes, I mean a lot of times. You have roadblocks, you have issues, you have new problems, and if you're not optimistic and your energy isn't there, you could hit that wall and quit moving forward. What's important is to keep moving forward, keep staying optimism, keep your energy high, and then when you do have a team that is more than just us here, when you do have a team, it's inevitable that somebody is going to feel down at some point. That your optimism and your energy flow to that next person. So being contagious in your optimism and your energy is necessary, and it's something that we have to do intentionally, or maybe a second nature for you. I don't know, but for me, I got to be intentional about it. To
Well, what we have here and what's helped me is your environment contributes a lot to that energy. And so what we have here is we have dry erase boards throughout the house. I have one in my room, like a big one. I got one in my office, and I got one like in the hallway, two in the hallway, three in the hallway. And it's just kind of like that notes of like daily reminders as you walk by it. It shows like what our goals are and what we plan to accomplish. And we have a big calendar out there that has like all of our events, so we can kind of see that. And I would say that's pretty much what you're talking about is we created an environment where everything is just right there. The energy, you see it and you immediately can reattune to that big overall vision.
yeah, I think that definitely helps. I think it's more on like an internal level that you got to ensure that your optimism, your energy's there, because you can surround yourself with your environment all you like, and that definitely is going to impact you. But if you as a person are not making steps to ensure like negativity doesn't enter your mind, um, that's what's important. Which
Goes back to yesterday's podcast about the gym importance too.
did you?
The gym gives you a lot of energy.
Mm, yeah, it's definitely a tool to use. Moving on, he talked about social media, and you think social media massive time waster, right? True, but there also are good things that come from it. He says he's on social media, but the purpose is to mine for ideas because ideas are there. The people that he follows are people that he believes to be smart people who have good ideas that inspire him. And so that's what he uses social media for. That's kind of what I intend to use when I open it up. That's my thought process is what are the other creators, other inventors, other successful people doing and putting out, what messages are they putting out that I can kind of reformulate my thinking to match, or what ways are creatives creating content, because I'm also trying to create content to push my brands, our brands. So what are things that they're doing that I could emulate or bring into my own style? So that was social media. Next thing he talked about was being understood, because first thing he said is I gave up on this a long time ago. Gave up on trying to be understood. He thinks of himself as an inventor, and he follows his curiosities. And he loves solving problems. So what he says is you have to decide how much energy you're willing to give towards being understood. I think that's pretty deep. A lot of people, especially when you take into account social media and friend groups, and putting yourself out there, a lot of the concerns on people is like, well, they're not going to understand. So, like, how can I make them understand? And maybe making them understand isn't what you should be focused on. You should be focused on pushing your curiosities out in the avenues that you are pursuing as far as communication wise. What do you think? I think that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, at some point, you want your business to be understood. I
Yeah.
think like in a development phase,
I think for
like as far as
him,
being understood, maybe I don't. Like I get it at the beginning if you're trying to build something and you don't want to clear out the noise of people that are telling you stuff. Like they don't see where your vision goes.
hmm yeah, and I think that's kind of where he's going with it.
Yeah. At some point they will see it, but perhaps that's talking about the beginning stages where you're just like,
I think the route that you're thinking is marketing, where 100% it's important for the
yeah,
marketing of your brand to be understood by the people you're trying to sell to. But from what his point of view is his own just personal thoughts and curiosities and moving his business into where his vision is. So I think that's kind of his thought process,
it's
because
relatable.
he's not saying don't ever let people understand what you're thinking. He's saying you have to choose and decide how much energy you're willing to give towards making people understand,
Yeah, keep them guessing.
and who maybe that you want to understand. You probably want your spouse to be on the same page as you, or your business partner to be on the same page as you, but do you need the cashier at the grocery store to be on the same page as you, or do you need your friends on Facebook to be on the same page as you? Maybe not. And then the last topic that was covered in the podcast I was listening to was time value. So he made some comments about him, things that he are traits about himself. He said, "I really value my time. I care deeply about the things I work on. Every minute every minute I am doing this," and this he was referring to speaking on a podcast. Every minute I'm doing this is a minute I'm not doing something else. And so every decision should be looked at in the lens of an opportunity cost. So there's only so much time, and it goes back with what we said in the previous episode, where the one resource that is given equally to everybody is time. There's only so much time that you have. And so every minute that you're putting into one thing, for example, this podcast, is a minute that you can't be putting into something else.
Hmm.
So that's why priorities are important. And you know what your end goal is so that you can form everything else that you're working on through that to accomplish that. But that was my notes from that one, and I thought that was pretty good. This is the first time I've listened to the Founders podcast. It was recommended through BTN's podcast that I was listening to, or Nick Bear's podcast, and I liked it. I'll probably listen to some more of that. They take different founders, CEOs, and they interview them, and then they talk about the key points and takeaways.
That's just like the School for Hard Knocks or something.
School for Hard
Have you
Knocks.
seen that Instagram guy that goes around and interviews CEOs and famous, or not necessarily famous, but like people that are like multi-millionaires to billionaires. And he always asks like, what piece of advice would you give the younger generation? Like, how did you do what you did?
I think the difference is that's kind of like short form, where he catches the person off guard and they have to think of something, versus this is probably more thought out and a longer interview with structure.
Oh yeah, 100%. That just reminded me of that.
Speaking of structure, he talked about they gave a recommendation for a book um, about, I don't know if it was written by, I don't think it was written by Jeff Bezos, but it was about Jeff Bezos and the memoirs and meetings, and it's called Invent and Wander. Basically, it's talking about his Jeff Bezos philosophy when it comes to meetings with his team and with other, I guess, individuals, meetings with his team mostly. He says, I want crisp documents and messy meetings. And what he meant by that was, I don't want structured, like, I don't want my team to rehearse the meeting before we sit down and talk about it. I want it to wander so that we can be creative and I can be part of the creative process and not just be briefed to. So that was pretty interesting and something that I'd take into one, where I work right now, and then two, the future of what we're building here. So that when we sit down, we don't want like a checklist. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, done. Get out of here. I want the meetings to be able to be messy so that we can figure out creative solutions and get the mind flowing.
There might be a potential downside to that though, as far as like time.
100%, yeah. But like, I guess in the meeting if it's productive or not, because if you're sitting there running in circles around nothing, you could be like, all right, get out of here. Um, but I guess the biggest thing is, what he was saying was, are there any dissenting opinions? So
Mm-hmm.
when something's brief to you, I think everybody just kind of buys in and they're like, okay, this is what we're going with versus, or this is what we're telling leadership and we're just going to leave it at that,
Mm-hmm.
versus being able to get to the what are the issues that we're actually having and then what is causing those issues. So right now it's just us, so it's pretty easy to have those conversations. But when there's more people on board and levels of leadership, mid-level managers, all that, that's when it's going to be a deeper level of importance on what time is being used and what is being discussed when we're sitting down to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
Sounds good.
But yeah,
I like that.
that's the completeness of what I was talking about today or listened to today.
Pretty good. Consistently getting longer.
Yeah, I feel like it's gonna not always be this long though, because
Maybe you
is the
start
week.
writing notes of all your podcasts you listen to, then
Well, when
we're
I
going to continue to have long meetings.
during the work days, I don't really have time to listen to all these podcasts, but it's a weekend, so I'm able to, as I'm sitting down and cooking, putting a podcast on, and whenever I'm doing stuff, I can put it on in the background.
I sit over there at the computer just typing away. I don't have to, I don't listen to podcasts as much
You can't
right
put a
now.
podcast on when you're doing something creative because you're doing one or the other. You're listening or you're not. It's got to be something like mundane, like the stair stepper at the gym, or um,
I swear I listen to my podcast. The only problem is I don't have anything to like write it down. Maybe I
yeah.
should have the podcast here and then like have a sticky note or something here and just start writing down as I'm on the stairs.
That's why this book, I like a small book because I can carry it around with me. Yeah, I do it like when I'm driving or at the
That might be a
cooking.
good use of time to, because I mean, I already listened to a lot of educational stuff doing cardio
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not running right now because I'm trying to keep my
Yeah.
heart rate at 130 beats per minute to 140.
Mm-hmm.
for 40 minutes. So it's not like it's going crazy fast. But if I just have like on one side have the podcast, on the other side has to have my notebook.
This is when um, AI and these like AI vision glasses are gonna come into use because you're gonna be doing your cardio, whether it's the rower or a jog or whatever, and you're gonna be able to have your notes in front of you and your podcast on the other side, and you're still gonna be able to do your workout. And then you're gonna be able to listen, say, "Hey Siri" or Jarvis or whatever, take a note of that. Uh-oh.
Oh,
Siri's listening to us. You're going to take a note of that and move it over here to your notes. And then later you can go back and refine that. But I don't know. That's pretty cool. One
yeah,
day.
the future, man,
I say one day, but it's probably going to be like next year
or earlier.
or sooner. Yeah, you never know. But that's all she wrote. So thanks for tuning in.
Yep. Till next time.